guest today came in from Texas and Boston. I've got Mike White here. He's a CPA and also has a consulting firm that specializes in healthcare and medical. And then Brian and Chris also have a consulting firm called Practice 360. A lot of you have met Brian and Chris previously. They are great partners for Live Oak Bank. They've sent a lot of business our way over the past couple of years and will continue to do so. I've asked them to come today to give our team a presentation, just a general overview on mainly the dental industry, a little bit of healthcare. But they're going to talk about a variety of topics. And then also I've asked them to talk about some of the services they offer, because I can see that as a value add for our existing clients in the portfolio if we have somebody struggling, but also on the front end if we have somebody that's looking to get off, starting a practice or buying a practice that needs representation on the accounting side, or even just as a practice coach. So they're going to talk about a few of their services and things that they can add to our clients, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A after that. So take it away, please.
All right.
Great, thank you, Mike. Can everybody hear me okay? Up top? Fantastic. Good afternoon. As Mike said, I'm Chris Majorana. Coming in here today, I was kind of given the thought that we have a lot in common, because neither of us really have any idea what I'm going to say today. But I was given a presentation last week for Brian, and at the end of it, he said, it was good and original, and I was pretty fired up about that. I thought that was a really great thing to say, and fortunately, he came back and said, well, the good part was the original stuff, and the not so good part was stuff that you made up. So I just wanted to thank you for really taking the time. Got a great group here. It's you have a busy day, and it means a lot to us for you to come out. I think, as Mike had stated, we've got about 60 minutes or so, and our presentation will probably last about a half hour, and we did leave some time at the end for questions. But what we really want to do is try to create a discussion. So feel free to interrupt. If the content is a question on it, raise your hand, and we'll get that answer right out to you. The discussion itself, and Mike touched on this, we're going to really talk about three key things. Who are Practice Advisors 360? Really, what do we do? Then we're going to drill down a little further. We'll be providing an overview of the dental market, and a market that's experiencing evolution in really the way that they operate. So I think that's going to be pretty interesting. And then we'll be talking about some specific dental practices. And you may know yourselves, having experience with them, but definitely in the future you'll definitely have a better idea. So what I wanted to do was to introduce really the two key principles of our organization. Brian showed it in Michael White. I'll start with Michael. Picture here with them.
Is the thing on? If you can't tell which one's which.
Yeah, you can't tell which one's which.
But use the
Michael is the founder and senior partner. There he is, big handsome Mike. Founder and senior partner of Mike White Associates, as well as DME. Mike started his business and career as an auditor at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Mike honed his skills in the large corporate environment, including working as a senior accountant at a regional bank. And his cumulative experience taught him the value of forecasting, the process, and inspired the model for both DME and MWA, which they currently deliver to small and mid-sized business clients. Now, Brian Choate, he's the founder and principal partner of Practice Advisors 360. This is a professional service firm and integrated suite of management services for independent physicians, as well as dental practices. And Practice Advisors 360 is a national management firm. We deliver services such as analysis of markets for entry, strategic business planning, systems architecture for practitioners to maximize the value of their practice asset. So I think I'm going to hand over the mic to Brian. He's going to go into a little bit more detail. in regards to really who is practice of Practice 360.
Well, I'm not sure if I need that. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
This
you only
might
need
work.
one, and as long as that's on, you should be good. There you go, like that. Is that
It does say on.
green? Is it green?
It's green.
All right, you're good, baby.
All right, so if I'm good, I'm good. So, thanks for the introduction, Chris, and we appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you guys. We have, I think, in independent pieces, whether it's Mike White, myself, and some of the other partners that we use, we've worked with Live Oak over the years. So we appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys. What we're doing, I think, is interesting to your group based upon the fact that our core focus is retail medicine. So we're going to take today to talk mostly about dentistry, which is where a lot of our service providers have their core concentration and their core competencies. But we expand into retail medicine platforms, and we work with a lot of the same existing client bases that you guys work with. Veterinary, urgent care, if you will, at some point. Dentistry, optometry. So we have a lot of the same crossover clientele. So what we want to do is just take a brief minute to introduce who we are. Chris kind of walked you through who the principals were, what we're going to try to do, and then we're going to talk more about, as Mike had asked us to talk a little bit about the dental market. And I think at that point, we'd like we'll have the conversation about where the market's going, what the trends look like. But we would probably want to have some questions and full discussion at that point so that we can tailor it down to what's most important to Live Oak. So, Practice Advisors 360, it's really an aggregation of specialists that provide services to healthcare practitioners. So we come together, we're a group that's been working together independently just by referral relationship and by working relationships over the last 10 years. So we decided to take the specialization on the services that most impact the efficiency, the management, profitability of these practitioners and aggregate it under one roof and singularize the point of contact. And it's a matter of, if you work with doctors like all of you do, time is the most valuable thing to the doctor. You have to be able to meet their schedule, work around it. So when we come in, prior to putting together the Practice Advisors 360, you have 4 or 5 different client interfaces, 4 or 5 people trying to work with a doctor, 4 or 5 different existing streams of relationships that can get a little bit convoluted, complicated, and it loses the efficiency. So the design of the firm was to singularize that point of contact, drive efficiency through that, and then in a broader sense, it was to take the conversation from the dental practitioner, because it's being forced on them anyways. The market's going to force this on them anyways, but take the conversation to the dental practitioner away from the investment into an income stream and into the actual asset. And so many dentists will open a practice, and the thought process for them is it's their income stream. They don't take the time to focus on what their decisions are doing to the actual value of that asset. So we want to we do implement systems to maximize the value of the practice asset, but really to define the fact that it's an asset for them. Next slide. So, and overall what we do, we put a lot of text onto the screen, so we're not going to read it. I mean, it's for the presentation to be distributed, but realistically, what we do is we help them strategically create a strategic plan, implement the strategic plan, put in systems, monitoring, and the biggest part that I think that what we do is we bring the monitoring to the systems that we've created, and then we reposition after getting actual data and making data-driven decisions. So that's what we do.
So back to you guys, just for clarification. I mean, you guys are kind of like the one-stop shop. If I'm a dentist or a medical doctor, I go to you guys and say, help me out from my CFO function to maybe acquisition, expansion. Just be there for me, and you're going to consolidate all the best practices and the best people to help me do that. Is that a fair statement?
It's a fair statement.
Separate businesses?
They are separate businesses that come together in a joint venture.
And we get to touch on that. We basically, as Brian was alluding to, we've been working together from a networking standpoint, from a referral standpoint, going to dental shows together, vet, urgent care,
surgery centers, as Mike now knows, toxicology, very.
Not because I failed a drug test.
Right.
That's
That's a different story.
No,
It's another story.
But we pull together all these resources, and we've always said to our clients that, hey, this is a one-stop, our team's all together. Yes, we're independent from each other, but we're at least bringing you a team. You're at the meetings together, and it's one singular source, as Brian mentioned. So, we overlap.
So when you go to the Hinman in Atlanta,
Yeah.
are you gonna have a booth as 360, or are you gonna have a bunch of individual booths?
We will brand as 360 into the markets that we're expanding into. So, and realistically speaking, we take this approach to increase the opportunities that we'll see in the market, right? It reduces our cost per sale, we come in from different angles, but it helps the doctors overall in an efficiency standpoint, because we can say to a graduating dental student that if you're gonna open your office, we can do it turnkey, or we can swim our lane and do just exactly the one singular function that you need us to do really well. And downstream on the existing practices, Mike's firm was built to hub out on full CFO services. So we can provide full management, which we'll get into later, because as the market evolves, the efficiencies in the single owner-operated practices become more and more important.
What we'll touch on as well, and we utilize the term DMSO. Some of you guys probably already heard that in your dealings day to day. What Brian and I have been talking about for years, I started a medical MSO, which is billing, IT, accounting, CFO, HR, practice management, sold it off. But I've been saying for years that the dental world needs something like that, a service provider that all comes together. So Brian, being in the industry, pulled this together, pulled Practice 360 together, utilizing resources he had, obviously what we do on the back office side, and it's one step further. We continue to aggregate data. I think the one piece that we'd like to look that is really not there in the technology and dental side is outsourced billing, the dental side. I know of a company, but I think that's one piece that we'd like to add in the future.
So we consistently, as you search verticals, we continuously look for where we can add efficiency, add verticals, and find the providers that we have a long enough vetted relationship with to enter into agreement. So this is a market overview. Right now, currently, I think most people are aware of the fact that there are significant changes across the entire healthcare spectrum. How does that impact dentistry? It's not as significant towards dentistry. Of course, it has an impact towards it. So we were going to just kind of walk from the beginning, just a broad overview. And if you want more narrow direction, any questions, any suggestions, we can speak to that. But when I first started in this space, it was 1998, way back. Keith Markland, I think you were involved in this at Masco. I was at a company called HPSC, and all we did was lend. We were a captive of a distributor that lent in the dental space. The distributor splintered and became Patterson and Shine for, realistically, those where all your reps came from, and HPSC remained in the market. But when I started in 1998, which is getting further and further away by the day, it's not that long ago, but the average cost to open a practice was $250,000. That's 1998, $250,000 to open an office. The hurdle rate, and you'll like this, like Stanley, our hurdle rate when we went to market then was 10.7 in 1998. So there's more and more changes coming every day in the market, but what I've seen over the years since I've been in the market are drivers that are increasing the investment cost of opening these practices. There was big demand in 1998. There were more men who were dentists at the time. There were shortages across the country, not only in rural areas or public government, issued payer mix areas. So what we're seeing now, what we saw over that time frame was really more of a commitment, a lot on the lending side. More lenders came into the space, and more of a commitment once the lenders were in, for the distributors and the manufacturers to focus on technology. And as they focused on technology, the cost of opening an office became higher and higher and higher. So to where we are today at $500,000, between $450,000, $500,000, depending on what part of the country you're going to open in. So,
and to touch on that as well, it's not only $500,000 for a standard practice. We've done deals at a $2.25 million startup practice. So we're seeing, especially as the investment dollars come in, these practices get bigger and bigger. It used to be 3 operatory build out. Brian and I did one last year. Is 21 operatories down in South Texas, day one. So Obviously, the hurdle for that guy is, he's needing to see 100 patients a day, just to break even. But it's more and more happening. He wants to do 20 locations and go from there.
Yeah, so as the growth has taken hold in the market and lenders came in and filled the void, as lenders reach some point of a tolerance based upon the size of their portfolios and the major ones, then the process for opening these dental offices becomes a little bit more complicated for the potential borrowers, which I'm sure when you speak to your potential borrowers, how many of them have a business plan?
All of them, right, Megan?
Don't go there.
Even
This is where the interaction comes in, folks. This is
Yeah.
where the interaction comes in.
Theoretically, all of them.
Theoretically, they all have to have it, right? But in their world, they never had to draw one. So why are they having to draw one now? It's another kind of a tie-in on some of the things that we do, helping them through the process forward. But the changes that you're seeing in the market are driven by these KPIs, these key performance indicators, the key metrics of the dental profession. So it's a large market and it's a growing market. The segments it's growing in, though, are going to be driven by certain aspects. So it's not all rosy news either. So the growth in the market will continue.
So just back up one. So
Yep.
56% of the business is over 60 and children.
Yeah, that's about accurate. Most of your spending in dentistry comes post-insurance plan. Insurance plans may bring them in the door, but 48% of all spending on dentistry over the last 20 years all comes out of pocket. So the bigger out-of-pocket expenditures are coming from your seniors.
So define a child under 12.
Under 19. 19 and under is the definition of the child.
Okay.
That's been defined by the ACA, which is going to have an impact. It's not going to have a distinct or a burdensome impact like it will on healthcare overall. On the medical side, it's still such a Rube Goldberg structure that people don't know how to figure it out. In this situation, what dentistry does, what the ACA does to dentistry, we have a slide on it briefly, but I'll get to it. It basically increases the awareness by mandating that all children 19 or under have insurance, dental insurance. They just have to have the essential coverage, like preventative care coverage. And the other driver is it redefines Medicaid to over 130% of poverty rate. So it increases the demand in Medicaid, which is already underserved. So in other words, it's a perfect government program.
And so to touch on these last 2 points, which you were trying to get into from an aging population, is retirement age for dentists has increased to 68 years old. There's multiple reasons for this, but the biggest one is they don't have somebody to sell a practice to. One, they're feeling the pinch of they need to be in there a little longer. Some of them have been put in structures where their CPA, their wealth advisor, has recommended them to refinance day one loan. It's 30 years old now, which Brian and I have unfortunately come into quite often, and they can get out of it now. But we're seeing an aging population, and depending on the state you're in, the territory you're in, we're hearing statistics of 60 to 70% of dentists and professionals are going to retire over the next 7 to 10 years. So that leaves a massive gap, which gets to the second bullet point, where dental schools are increasing the graduation rates to get more people out there, more population out there. And we can get to the dental school mindset, which has been interesting, as we've been out in the schools speaking, and what's shifted. We'll touch on that in the MSO conversation.
Yeah, we're going to move to that, but certainly as you look at what you just touched upon, your biggest growth in expenditures are your aging population, which is post-insurance, post-employment driven insurance, and your children. And the pediatric care is a huge driver and will continue to be a big driver in the growth of dentistry. The least likely age group to visit the dentist is between 19 and 34. A lot of you are between 19 and 34. I assume you know that you fit that category. So we talked about the dental students. That's another great trick that the government will do. They are increasing the schools, the enrollment, the ability to fill what's perceived to be a shortage or coming shortage. But in their infinite wisdom, they have increased the cost of dental school so much so that it is reducing the demand or the supply of practice owners. People have a hard time walking out of school with the amount of debt that they have and then reinvesting into their practice immediately, or investing into a practice. So it's changing the way that dentistry is delivered by reducing the amount of your single solo operators. So we've seen over the last 10 years, 66% increase in student loan debt.
Brian, where are those, so if they're not immediately trying to go into ownership, can you talk a little bit about where those young dentists are going?
Yeah, we're going to hit up on that, but I think it's probably a nice transition here.
Okay.
But they are going in, there is an increase into some form of uniformity in the market where there's an excess of excess capital coming in for a corporate distribution model. And so a doctor coming out of school, a dentist coming out of dental school with a higher debt load is enticed by a guaranteed salary, no headache of ownership, and what they'll see downstream, because we know the medical model is they probably don't want to work for a corporation after a while, but that is what you're starting to see. So they either go out into employment, or you're having the guys that do want to open an office have the appetite to do more than one, because they're getting, there's a reduction in profit margins, which means they have to aggregate a larger volume, which means they have to have more than one location. Not all the time, but I mean, that's just kind of a driver in the market.
And touching on that a little bit more is what we're seeing, especially out of West Coast, you mentioned California earlier going out there. I mean, we're seeing students come out of school out of California with $400,000 or $500,000 student loan debt. And they're coming out immediately with promises, especially in the Medicaid boom, where they come and associate, make $400,000 or $500,000 as a 1099 or employee of somebody else. Obviously, that model has changed quite a bit. Again, we'll touch on that a little bit more. But is it the next slide that we flip to?
Not yet.
No, that. So one thing we talked about, so when we present to students, we did a presentation. We've been doing schools for years now, but 3 years ago, we would ask the question to a room probably double this size, how many of you want to go and do your own practice? 95% of the room raised their hand. How many of you want to do multiple practices? 90% of those people raised their hand. I asked that same question 6 weeks ago of 125 students. 2 people raised their hand, they wanted to be self-employed, which blew me away. But I think a lot of folks, they saw their peers graduating, fearful of some of the slower starts in some of the dental industry that we've been seeing. Obviously, Starbucks model, dental model is kind of one and the same in some markets where we see a dentist, strip mall after strip mall right down the street. So it becomes a little bit more competitive, so they decide to go associateship for a little bit longer, be employed, get the $150,000, $180,000 a year just so they get a baseline. Of course, with one of the bigger lenders, Video Bay, shutting down a lot of start lenders, that also hurt the market quite a bit as well, which you guys know Video Bay very well.
So what do they all do?
And just in the industry, after they
Just go
graduate,
work for
So
3 doctor
So,
practice or something?
a lot of, so you have a split population. I think you have a smaller population, probably 5 to 10%, that has daddy's dentist or daddy's friend that they work for as an intern as they grew up. They're going to take over that practice. There's already a plan in place. I think you have a much bigger population that, is going to go associate for the Pacific, the Heartland, the bigger groups. And those are the tier 1 groups. And then you have the tier 2, tier 3 groups that are 30, 40, 50, 60 locations that will pick up an associate, keep them for a year or 2. Some of them give a path to ownership, small 10, 20% to keep them around. And some of them don't. They already know they're going to go off and with a nice, strict non-compete and all that. What we're seeing, especially from a lot of California residents, we have a lot of California folks coming to Texas or even the East Coast, employed for a little while, pay off some big debt from California because they can't afford to live there and pay off that debt, and then go back. So there is a nice push that way as well.
Yeah.
So that's what there is a massive employment opportunity as Pacific Heartland continue to gobble up more and more practices. There becomes that opportunity.
And we want to, and part of what we do is we want to amplify the volume on the fact that if they are witnessing practices that are underperforming, their friends that graduated before them, it's typically because they entered the market anecdotally, without plan, into heavily saturated areas, and unaware of how to compete for patient flow. And so our thought process is you can enter a competitive market. People do it all the time, businesses do it all the time, but you have to have a strategy, you have to have the systems in place to capitalize on that, and that's what we do. But the other aspect of dentistry that's changing significantly, the graduating rates. So most of the dentists graduating today are female. That's not to say 80%, it's 53 to 47 in the state of Texas. And UTSA has the dental school has a statistic that they typically tend to practice for 7 to 9 years before leaving practice. So they are not as engaged in wanting to open their own practice immediately. Those attitudes are changing to some degree, but that also has an impact on where you're seeing some shortages of dentists out there. So we did talk about this. This is the impact of the ACA. Again, it's illiterate legislation. It has a much larger impact on medicine and on healthcare than on dentistry. Dentistry still has, we put down the bottom, not as dramatic with dentistry because they still have always kept a price and a discretionary expenditure between that relationship and patient and provider. You go to the doctor and they say you need an MRI. You don't say why. You go and get your MRI. But nobody asks how much it costs. So without any knowledge of price, there's no real opportunity to make a market. Dentistry has always had discretionary expenditures. They've always had the component where people know what they're paying for dental work. So the ACA will likely not have as dramatic an impact. It should increase awareness. It should increase demand and the child flow, just because up now you're mandatorily covered up to 19 years old. And then the Medicaid side of things, which brings kind of a corresponding issue where you have a concentration of payer mix. So there's a huge demand in Medicaid. There's growth to be had. It's not uniform. It's block granted out to states. So each state's distribution of Medicaid is a little different. So it would have to be spoken to individually as you look at the different states. But there's huge opportunity. You just have to digest the concentration risk, I'm sure you like that, of the payer mix, which is 100% government. So, not to keep it too basic, we just talked about, primarily if you're opening a general dental office, you know, what are you looking for to define it? We kept it as simple as possible, meaning that realistically speaking, when you open your own office as a general dentist, you are either going to go for the full family approach, hygiene-centered, bread and butter dentistry, and you're going to, instead of taking full fee, you're going to take 65, 70%. You're going to take that in-network payment. You're going to take, that's going to be your revenue stream. Those are your PPO offices, and almost, it's the highest driver of your
Advertising.
yeah, general, yeah, it's the highest driver of your advertising dollars, but it's the highest component of the dental offices that you see. There are other practices that focus on fee-for-service. Those are rare that they're singularly focused in that, but when they are much lower volume, much higher margin, almost all discretionary procedures.
And does everybody know what fee-for-service means in the dental world? For the most part, yeah.
Could you just explain it real
Yeah,
quick?
so private PPO is, you have your insurance card, you have your Delta Dental. The rates are contracted with the doctor agrees to take whatever payment that insurer pays. Fee-for-service, think of it more of a concierge type practice. The doctor sets his own rates. He can drop through out of network and take whatever insurance will take out of network, but you pay the delta as a patient. And what you're looking for there is more, I actually go to a fee-for-service doctor even though I have insurance. Because you're looking for more of a concierge type approach, a little bit more longer time with the dentist, and hygiene and all that kind of stuff, and it's just a higher approach. I get a cookie every time we go. And then of course you have your last piece, which is Medicaid, which is more government driven, and really for dental industry has been where the focus has been on clamping down on reimbursements, the abuse of Medicaid, of course, as we all heard about Texas, more Medicaid dollars flowing through Texas than all of the 49 states combined. You're welcome for that. And there was, there was a lot of rampant abuse. And kind of going back to the slide before, in this world, as far as ACA and dental, what we've seen in the years that we've been working in healthcare in general, it seems to go in cycle of who gets abused by the insurance company. First it's physicians, then home healthcare, then dental, then vets, ops, whatever it may be. Of course, vet doesn't have as much insurance, but and then it cycles back. We have physicians that 5 years ago doing the same amount of volume, triple booking their day, all the way through the entire day, cannot see another patient, or making half as much as they were 5 years ago on doing the same work. And it's just changing because insurance continues to clamp down, expenses continue to rise up, and all that kind of stuff. So that breeds the whole fee-for-service model. I just want to slow down my life, charge what I want to charge, and go for that. And I do see a lot of doctors, my actually personal physician as well. I like the concierge My personal doctor is a concierge. It's actually the guy in the Vistaprint commercial, if you've seen that, Dr. James. So anyways, so that's those are the 3 buckets as far as insurance.
We just made them 3 buckets.
Yeah.
A lot of practices will take a combination of 2 of those up there, PPO, fee-for-service, PPO, Medicaid. It just depends on where you're located geographically inside the community and what services make sense to offer. So this basically takes us back to where the trends are in the market right now. It just kind of summarizes, and then we'll take a look at the 2 different, for the sake of Live Oak, there are essentially 2 projects that you will see, the 2 practices that you will see, the sole owner and then the single owner operator that wants to do multiple practices. Those are going to be the type of opportunities that your salespeople will bring in and you'll be able to review. So we'll talk to why the graduate that wants to open 1, 2, 3, and 4, why there's a high demand for that and why it's logical to some degree.
So somewhere in here, compare us to the B of A, to the Wells, and then everybody else.
So you want your comparison based upon credit appetite, process efficiencies, and deliverables, because,
Who's your favorite?
well,
All of the above.
yeah.
All of the
You can
above.
get to it.
Yeah, we can get to that, and we can keep that very specific, because we do have a lot of working relationship with all of the lenders in the market.
Right.
So, but the realistic approach here is that there's going to be significant downward pressure, whether it's from governments get involved in the payer mix, they're going to consistently and continuously strangle the life out of reimbursement rates. Insurance companies will follow suit. Standard of care is being driven by lobbying and manufacturers and people who want you to buy $200,000 3D imaging machines are driving standard of care. So the cost to invest in these practices goes up. The need for efficiencies, economies of scale, all of that is a natural outcome for what's being pulled on. It's a push-pull on the single-owner dentist, which is not at all a dying breed, but it's definitely shifting.
And to follow up, I'd like to flip of that of what do you guys see as struggles when you're trying to get a deal through? Mike and I spent some time this afternoon, we spent some time in Florida talking about deal flow, what's your appetite? Obviously we're doing Dr. Mock here recently with you guys, which was completely out of your norm, but we're getting it done, which is exciting. But where do you find is a struggle? And what can we as advisors and strategic partners in the market look for you guys in deals? Because I think between Brian and I, we generate a little bit of loans.
Well,
as well.
we
So-
have good feedback, I think, for
Yeah.
where you guys are strong, where there's deficiency in the market, and where your market makers are going.
Yeah.
Which, everybody's aware that POA is the market maker, so what are they doing?
Right.
So we have some.
Can't wait to hear all that.
Right. And it's not on the
Right.
slides, we'll talk to that offside.
Yeah.
So. But specifically for what you guys will typically see, you'll have a new graduate, hopefully they out and practice a little bit, get a little experience, and then they decide they want to open a practice. They're either going to be what you're used to seeing, the doctor that finds a location, opens shop, tries to work themselves down to 4 days a week, standard member of the community, and then 25 years later they try to sell the practice.
But that's 2 out of how many?
That's 2, what's
2
that?
out of how many you said?
Oh.
You asked that question?
Oh, 125 at the dental school.
2 out of 125.
So is this,
Going,
That's a little outlierish on those percentages.
I'm not gonna forget that.
well, you can. I mean, look, it's skewed. We're back in Houston next week, actually. That was San Antonio school. No, I'm sorry, that was Houston school. We go to San Antonio school. Actually, I think Ryan's there today doing the presentation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was completely surprised by that because you normally don't have some people that participate, but I was completely surprised. Now, will that change in a few years after they're tired of working for the man and they think they can do it better? Absolutely. But I think the data is still skewed from the standpoint of they may just be okay working for somebody else. So, but when we
Is that
look
close
at
50-50 men and women?
That is probably 53, if it's San Antonio, it's 53, 47 women.
But close.
Yeah, it's very close. It's all very close.
Female-driven data.
No.
it was a good mix in the room.
But you
And
did
that
see-
that was D3s, D4s in the room.
Yeah.
So that's getting close to finishing at that point. Because we do D1s, D2s sometimes as well. At that point, they don't want to just want to get through tomorrow, right? But yeah, so with practice ownership, when we look at this, we look at a couple, obviously from new graduate, you're looking at going as a solo practitioner, and then joining the corporate dentistry. And of course, there's other buckets within that, go join the
Yeah.
onesie twosie guy, take over, family practice, family fun practice in their small hometown wherever they grew up. But what we're tending to see right now is corporate dentistry becoming such a model and such a group mentality. And we lump some of our DMSO clients down to 5, 6 locations, and we start scaling it up from there. So that's kind of where it goes, and they're out there recruiting, they're at the dental shows, they're asking, they're getting associateships, they're doing as much marketing as we are, trying to get the same guy, same.
And then to be
None of that's
effective-
good for you. It's
Sorry?
a whole discussion, none of that's good for you.
There's always
The world's
opportunities.
moving away.
Always opportunities.
Oh, no, we believe that there's plenty of opportunity for Mr. Stanley.
They're going to get into the corporate dentistry side, the DMSO, and there is a place for us in that market.
And that's something, getting back to the question I asked, of, finding your place within that market, knowing, because a lot of ours, it may not be a startup necessarily, but it's an expansion. Where we've niched out and where Brian's helped us niche out is the group practices. That has become our core niche, expansion of second, third, fourth location, our largest group being in excess of 60 locations today. So it's kind of that model of just where do y'all fit in, what can we do to help you guys?
We want to be careful not to overstate. This is a trend,
Yeah.
but not a tsunami or anything. I mean, 82% of practitioners are still solo and private.
Right.
And so, they'll transition that way, or they'll continue to be the driver in a lot of ways. But there is what you're seeing. You'll see more and more. I'm sure your credit people can speak to this. They'll see more and more opportunities on that solo practitioner. It's a simple business plan. It's roughly $450,000 to $500,000. It's whether it's leasehold improvements or real estate, it's the only thing that you guys are going to try to sift through. But the model itself is a very easy, digestible. You've seen one executive summary. You've seen just about all of them.
Right.
There's only so many ways you can run a dental office. So then the other one that you're probably getting more and more comfortable seeing is the owner of 2 to 3 practices who says, I would like to get what essentially works out to a guidance line for 3 to 4 new locations inside of this year. And we want to take them down, we want to phase the takedowns throughout the year. That is becoming a big driver, just because we talked about the economies of scale. People would like to have multiple practices to get back to the margins that they had previously. So there will continuously be a push in that direction. If you want to know a specific opening in the market for a bank like Live Oak as compared to your behemoths, that's one of them. They're very unable to digest that model, and they're not nimble or flexible as they used to be when they were simply Sky Financial.
So 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Yes. Those are your
So
opportunities.
stands for what?
Dental service, dental management service organization. Just like medical, it's just MSO is what it is. So in the dental world, they've thrown the D on top. So DMSO and the MSO, so it's been set up the DMOs and some,
The DMSO, though, just so you know, so the single owner, and this is big for credit because we'll hear this all the time. They have 2 locations and they want to drop in 3 to 4. And we'll hear in response, how are they going to practice dentistry at all 6 locations? What the DMSO is the management structure that allows them to centralize their involvement in these practices through the management group.
So is that typically owned by one guy, 5 partners?
Right?
a little bit of mix. Sometimes it's one, and the folks that do want to get out of dentistry, they want to get out of it. They don't want to be in somebody's mouth anymore.
Right.
I mean, there are the students that day one, they're going to dental school, don't want to be a dentist. They just want to be a business owner, which we don't want because they take 1 business class. Where we've seen headaches, to kind of piggyback off Brian's sense, I was talking to Mike about this, where we see a hang up is at location 3, when they go to 3rd location, location 8, location 15, and then you continue to go from there. It's usually every 8, 7, 8 at that point. But 3 is usually the hang up when it's a solo doc. Sometimes 1 or 2 docs. 3 is like, how are they going to split their time? Where's the infrastructure? What's going on? And at that point, they've individually done loans, so they're not cross-collateralized. So you almost have to go in there, take it all out, and then provide the expansion line so it's all cross-collateralized.
So Mike, this is where they run into snags getting financing for the expansion, 3, 8, 15.
So what happens is at 3, 8, 15, the lender comes back and says, I want to see that aged a little bit. I want to see the last one aged. So all of a sudden, you've stopped the momentum. somebody else has come in some of their marketplace or some locations they wanted through site analysis,
Yeah.
and it derails them a little bit in that process. So where we have seen, that's what we have seen in the market so far.
How
And
much
we want to,
financing would a guy with 10 locations need?
So
Well-
you want to mix, obviously with our clients, we want a mix of, at that point, you should be generating enough capital. We try to keep them not generating their lifestyle to that point every single year at any location. But you're looking at, every one of those 500,000.
yeah, and it's important to know because there's a lot of service firms that you guys know really well, actually. There's a perpetual punting on debt reduction. There's a consistent repositioning, modifying, and extending of terms that don't allow them to actually pay down any of their debt and get an equity position. So we're looking for, when we look at these groups, we're looking for systems architecture. Can they even handle adding more locations? What will it do? And what have they been doing with their debt structure? That's important to us. It's as important to you guys on the, from a credit analysis standpoint.
So Brian, how do we know these are the right guys to take one practice to 3 to 8? Because you need a certain type of person to do this. And how do we, we're talking to them over the phone, we will go out to visit them, but there's still,
It
has to
gets
be a
into,
plan.
at that point, they're running a business, right? And you guys, you look at business financials, what we were talking about at lunch today, it gets into, do they have the systems, do they have the scalability to put the solutions in place? We were meeting a group yesterday that Brian and I had met with a few weeks ago, Mike Richardson, and we started asking these general questions, and he wants to scale quickly. Now they have a significant amount of cash, they have 10 million cash, they want to leverage up 40. So great opportunity. However, what are you doing in accounting? Well, we don't know yet. What are you doing? Coaching, operations, systems, billing? I don't know yet. Great, we have a lot of cash. Just put it in the bank for now. Let's figure all that other stuff out first. And it gets into that kind of conversation. What are the systems and processes? And that's where we have focused our efforts as a non-traditional CPA consulting firm. So.
And when we bring clients forward, we bring them for financing as well. So we need a working partnership with a lender to begin to feed back to us. These are where we really want to see here. We build out structured questionnaires, structured conversations and discussions to deliver the information we think is important from the standpoint of, are the management systems in place? Do they have the capacity to do this? But we will consistently need feedback from you guys as to what you're looking for as you continuously digest these opportunities. But our thought process is the same thing. We are not working with groups that are going to be here today, gone tomorrow, if we can help it. So our thought, we do a lot of vetting on what their structures and systems look like. And by the way, we offer those. So that's another reason why
And
we
to get back to my
It's really the
earlier,
reason why we
to get back to my earlier question, that's why we want to know from you guys, what do you need to make the package work?
Sure.
So that's the biggest thing for our standpoint here. It's not just to pitch us. There's been a great strategic partnership. What else can we do to help to foster this relationship?
So that's where we drop this slide. And this slide, you can look at it at another time, but it basically, it's saying to the single practitioner, why would you need an advisor? And then it kind of breaks down what high-level points that we're looking at in running the practice. And then we get into, on the next slide, what is, and I think that credit probably wants to know what the hallmark of successful startup practices look like. And so, and we have pretty good data on this because these are our service lines that we deliver, so we know them inside and out. But if you look at market analysis and site selection, how many of the clients are going into the markets that actually have professional representation doing the market analytics? Understanding what are the best ratios, if you will. It's kind of a broad term, but what are you looking for the amount of residents, community residents to practitioner? Where are the open and available retail space? Where's the growth in the community going to be? So having a professional represent their interests and putting together some type of market analysis, some type of competitive analysis is important.
And I'm going to add to this is not a tenant guy, but what we have seen in the marketplace, something that, looking at deals as you do expansions and stuff, what we have found is in a lot of our groups, when I say the more structured groups, they have a single source tenant rep guy. They know what their model is, they can model it, they know down to zip code what it looks like. But in some of our other groups, we've seen it's where, whoever brings me the deal, I'll work with them. And it's very hodgepodge. That's where we see more location failures. because they just wanted to get in a deal, found a pretty location, but it really doesn't demographically meet the needs of that group. So that's where we've seen, utilizing the singular source to do all the representation has been a very beneficial need.
Right, so you're taking a look at your standard project for a dental office. I know that it would be great for both sides if they went out and found a pad site and built and actually had some real estate involved, but they usually do that after they've established some success in the retail space. So when they look at retail space, they are looking at a relatively large rent investment, and on top of that, they have to pay for the construction into it. So what's happened with the growth and the investment, the opening of a dental office, is that the length of term that they go into these lease spaces has gone from 5 years to 7 years, now to 10 years. And the reason is that the construction is anywhere, and again, this is regionally important, and it has changes, variations in region, but it's going to range anywhere between $90 and $140 a square foot. So if you're traditionally doing 2,000 square feet, that's almost $300,000 in construction for a space that you're renting. So the occupancy is now extended out to 10 years. In the average lease cost, because we're now asking the landlords, not only now, but we're aggressively asking the landlords to contribute on behalf of the construction side of things. So that gets put into the occupancy, and the typical occupancy cost continues to rise a little bit in the retail space. So there is an opportunity when after the doctor has gotten to a point where they have established patient flows, established patient charts, stable revenues, they understand their operating model. There is an opportunity of having that conversation with them, that investing in an additional $5,600 a month or an additional $60,000 a year, $70,000 a year for that lease space, why not build a practice and invest in real estate? That's the opportunity on that side. Mike, I think you could speak to budgeting for when a successful practice starts up.
Yeah. So on the build out, first you're starting the CapEx, as Brian was just alluding to. What we look at is about a $450,000 startup budget. 50,000 of that going to working cap. We also hope that tenant allowance, which we referenced at the bottom of that last slide, would be a credit in about month 2, month 3. That gets us to about 80,000, 90,000 working cap. But then you're looking at about 180 in leasehold improvements, 180 in dental equipment, another 40 in basically IT, software, marketing dollars, things along those lines to spend that 450. Then from a budgetary standpoint, this is where starting a practice versus purchasing a practice, obviously we touched on that a little bit. I know we're running out of time, but looking at a startup practice versus a DMSO practice, I believe it's in one of the appendixes we sent out as far as the pro formas on that. It is truly different when you look at a management-run company, the bottom line from a profit. Even though in a DMSO or a corporate-run company, they're still having to pay the doctor's salary, which as a solo practitioner, you're working for your salary. The margins are still better because of their buying power and lab and dental supplies, lease negotiation power, obviously business acumen, and negotiating with some of these vendor contracts is there. And as Brian touched on, the investment of, looking at 450 to 500. Anything outside of that is truly an outlier. It just depends. You see more of the outliers in pediatric practices. The 20 operatories where they have ortho, pediatric age children at different age buckets, and have 3 or 4 operatory chairs for each one of those. And then they usually have all the kids' toys, video games, that kind of stuff.
Mike, on the budgeting side for a general dentistry startup,
Yeah.
on some of the slower startups we've had, they're not hitting that 30 to 35 new patients a month. Is there a certain number that you expect your startups to spend on marketing? Is there a certain number, hey, you better spend at least $3,000 a month or $5,000 a month?
It's what it is. It actually starts high, right? 5,000 to 6,000 a month, tapers off to get to that patient volume. And one of the things we're struggling with now, actually, a combined practice Brian and I have is, we want to see mailers dropped. We want to see some ground advertising, meaning the referral doc, depending on what type of specialty it is. With general, you're basically at the beck and call of the patient volume, generating your own marketing. Make sure you're on the insurers day one. And that's one thing that's important is, that we're talking about, making sure they're starting the credentialing process 3-4 months before they open those doors. Because what happens if they don't, and we have so many people, oh, no, I haven't done credentialing yet.
Would that be,
You're
that's
4
probably a
months.
valuable question for us to ask on the
Yes.
underwriting side.
Yeah.
Is,
As important as when to start the credentialing is, have you analyzed your market to know what the community residents actually carry for insurance, where they're employed, where they carry it? So they should have an analysis done before they just decide to sign up for PPO networks. And how they sign up for PPO networks is as important. We're not going to get down the rat hole of credentialing. We do have a firm that is part of our group, but there are different ways to actually recognize revenues and sign up for these plans. And oftentimes the third-party agreements, which are buried deep in the text, are more valuable to the provider if they knew that. So if you sign up for something like Aetna, you are actually taking a reduction in what if all the third-party agreement payers that are a part of Aetna, if you just signed up for them directly, you'd make more per billable fee code.
So to expand on that also, sorry to interrupt.
How can that be in terms of if you buy a practice, you break even in 6 months, and if you start a practice, you break even in 9? I would make the assumption if I bought a practice, I'm going to be cash flow positive day one.
No, because it gets back to the recredentialing process. Right? You have to get all new recredential, NPI numbers, everything, which takes 3 to 4 months. So if you bought a practice today, you're not getting that first insurance claim for 4 months. Now what happens, it becomes a waterfall, right? So you're at month 5, 6, 7, it's 133% of claims because we have all that back AR that we collect.
Right.
But we still have to work off that deal. Whereas month 9 in the startup, your credential day 1 is what we push for, and it's all about patient volume at that point. So the infographic, touching on Mike, the infographic that Ryan had up a little while ago is one of our marketing pieces, but more or less, don't worry about it, more or less what we look at is statistically, we want to figure out how to get there. And I know we're butting up on our time, so I do want to get to Q&A, but we look for first year practice, general $450,000 in revenue over a 12-month period. General, that's kind of market industry standard. We shoot for with our practices 551 right in there for what we want to turn up. And then on DMSO management companies, we shoot more like 661. So there's higher expectation of those management groups, built-in marketing, all that kind of stuff. So, and we strive. Are there questions along the way? I know we've been doing a lot of talking. We touched on a lot of the last slides.
I would like you to get into the DMSO a little bit
Okay.
more,
We have
multi-practice.
time?
Yeah, we do. I'd maybe talk about it for 5 minutes, and then I want people to be able to ask the questions they have. But we are going to probably start seeing more projects, multi-practice owners, which we've already had several come in. And this is certainly an area where they can add a lot of expertise and value. And so I want you guys to just touch on this because it is a newer concept for us as a bank. And so I want you guys to definitely
So we're
touch on it.
seeing several things in the DMSO model, the management run company model. And this, to get to your point, when you're underwriting, it's going to be very important to understand what the contracts are written. We've seen everything from a corporate owned, where all 100% of the profits are swept up to management, which in some states is technically illegal, but there are ways around it, ways to run that contract. You then see pure business management agreements, meaning I'm going to take 10 to 15% of top line for doing the following services: IT, accounting, HR, management, billing, if they have a singular billing and scheduling. And then, of course, you have the last option where you have a franchise model where it falls under true FTD rules, franchise rule, audited financial statements, all that good stuff. But with that brings its own regulations, which you all probably know about. So in the DMSO model, it really gets into a few different categories where we've seen within all our groups. The bigger comments here are better economics. We're seeing better buying power. They're going in to negotiate with Burkhart, Benco, Henry Schein, Patterson, and getting their dental supplies sub 5%. Right now, the industry, if you look at it, is about 6.1%. We shoot for 5% for standard practice on dental supplies. Lab, depending on specialties, 5 to 6%. On a DMSO, they're getting it 3 to 4%. So they're buying down their rates because of the volume that they're bringing to the marketplace, and they're going in there with pre-negotiated contracts. Of course, the other thing that they're bringing, sorry to interrupt, was volume and negotiating power. Just like we see in the physician world, while we have multi-specialty under one single FedTex ID, we're seeing the same thing in the dental world where there's a little bit more negotiating. Now, if we talk to Nick, part of the 5 Lakes Pro, he'll tell you that 3 of the 10 major insurers are really the only ones you can negotiate with, but there is some negotiating power that happens in those 3.
They're also bringing better capital positioning for marketing and investing into that. So when they come into markets, they're better represented in terms of growing quickly as compared to, say, your solo operator that oftentimes doesn't realize they're up against some type of a corporate entity or group practice next door.
So the other
Do
thing,
they work 5 days a week?
they're open 6 in some cases.
Yeah.
And that's the
In
biggest.
this town, I'll tell you where the dentists are Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing, and that's the unfortunate change in this industry. I mean, we all grew up with a dentist that worked 3.5 days a week, made a couple $100,000, few $100,000 a year, played golf, fishing, diving.
That's what happens to you.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, they may not
I live
make
in
that
the
kind
wrong
of money,
city.
but they're playing golf. So you're just saying they're getting squeezed?
They're getting squeezed. And, I think the biggest thing right now that we'll see is we fast forward 5-10 years. I think there's a circle of life. Just as the physicians have joined groups, have joined hospitals, they've come back out because they want the independent practice of medicine. And that becomes the pitch for the IPAs, the management companies. Come back, be your own person, but join us, we'll get you better contracts to compete. I think the same thing's going to happen in time dental, because we're already talking to groups that are talking about that type of negotiated buying power, where they're, for 1%, for 2%, they'll give them the contracts, but it just gives them a royalty. So we are seeing stuff, as it plays out in the future, come back. I think the days of the week, corporate's going to stay 5-6 days a week and just push full throttle. Stay open at 7 a.m., open at 6 a.m. in some cases, stay open at 7, 8 p.m. at night.
It's a very transient relationship between employer and employee in that world. They burn quick.
The thing with DMSO, what's interesting is there's also two trains of thoughts of how they do it. There is a singular brand, one brand, every location's the same name, it gives them branding power, marketing power, all that. What the very large groups, for the most part, are doing, Pacifics, Heartlands, you wouldn't know it's a Pacific or Heartland. Aspen, I think you do know Aspen, but some of these, you just don't know what it is. It just says in fine print, subsidiary of, or powered by is another one that I like. Whatever management company that may be, because they want it to be John Doe, Dr. Wilmington, North Carolina. So they want you to feel like you're coming home or you're going to your practice, the same doctor you grew up with, but he's run by a corporate. So
Is he still there?
sometimes yes, sometimes no. A lot of times what happens is he'll go sell out.
'Cause I know on the vet side, with Heartland, for example, they keep the guy on for a period of time.
Yeah, they want transition because you have an attrition if you lose, and that gets back to the whole, when you sell a practice, 15% out the door on attrition if it's somebody that grew up with. So that's what we're seeing in the DMSO. Again, the sophistication is there. As you guys start looking at what you're wanting to do in locations, DMSO, as I alluded to earlier, we're starting to get practices with 3, 4, 5 locations that are starting to fall into this category, where they would get and need a traditional means, possibly, an SBA or conventional product. What we want to look at is our ability to take that debt down and allow them to get past that hurdle that we normally see. So,
Yeah, and I think we're going to kind of bounce just to real quickly. That's essentially what our model is, right? Which is to take the solo operator and to let them understand that they can have the power of these management companies on their own individual practice as opposed to doing 2, 3, 4, 5. We work with a lot of those guys, and it's going to continue to be a trend to grow that way. But what we want to offer them is the ability to, on a third-party agreement, have these type of management systems in place to be as efficient as possible. So if you could golf on Thursday, we'd be the reason why.
so let's actually leave that, go back to that. Let's finish on that so we can go to Q&A.
Well, I want to finish on the KPI.
Okay.
So one of the things that I come out of the banking world, or I'd say more lending than banking, just that dental-specific lending. And one of the things that we wanted to build for, not only for how we were delivering our services, but for the partners that we will build in this space is monitoring. And the data, in a lot of banks don't have very good data, which is surprising to us. But we want to collect the data and demonstrate how startups transitions, how they're actually performing relative to their pro forma and national average. If a pro forma is done by a dentist that's starting and we're not involved in it, it's anecdotal, it's likely overly aggressive. And so if you're marked down in your portfolio based upon performance against that pro forma, we need to find a way to build systems to let our partners, which are the lenders, know how are these assets actually performing. So we've kind of constructed a model based on, we'll just use the name because I really don't like their model, the Heartbeat program, but it has been efficient, and you know that from day
That's
one.
Bank of America's program.
It's been efficient in what they basically call the free consulting program to get their monitoring data. So we just built monitoring into our consulting already, and we think that that will provide better data, especially if they're partnered with our group. Mike, he's in collecting the data on a monthly basis, so it reduces all these call times to figure out whether or not you can actually get them to send you the information, and how accurate is the information, and is it really demonstrating in a snapshot whether or not that asset is performing. So Mike's group built out these KPI monitoring scorecards.
So this is, yeah, to touch on this a little bit. So, and to back up, I guess, to the initial intro. So, you know, our piece, getting back to the question of we all affiliated or unaffiliated, Practice 360 is a consortium of all these different companies. Then White Associates in Dental Medical Economics. DME, some of you actually may have heard of that company. It's a 65-year-old company that I acquired in 2010. Dental Medical Consulting, actually most of the business was up and down the Northeast Coast to East Coast. So we still have a ton of clients in Ithaca, New York, Ohio, actually down to North Carolina here. But what I bought the company for, what I liked about it was the data that they had. And we force every one of our docs, every one of our practices to have a budget in place. And we budget down to the KPI data, key performance indicators. I get asked the question a lot, what is that? So key performance indicators, so doctor days work, production per patient, number of patients seen, patient throughput per hour. We get down to that level, how many hours a day they're going to be open. And then, of course, collection ratio. And if they miss any one of these variables, we want to know and be able to point back to when you took a week off, or your hygienist left, or whatever it may be. So we give them a snapshot, and this is just a few buckets of our overall scorecard. We also incorporate AR aging, pieces of the balance sheet, and of course, we take this month-to-date out to a year-to-date variance as well. But we kind of force the issue of making sure that they understand that we want to know what they're doing. So I was telling Mike an example today at lunch of a doctor called screaming in November, December about he missed budget, you know, I screwed up the budget, blah, blah, blah. And I pointed back to the bottom line of total expenses. We were off 0.1%. I was pretty pleased with that. He, however, decided year, which we kept telling him was going to affect your top line, is to go back to a 3.5, 4-day work week when he was 5 days a week the year before. So nothing we can do about him producing more, or seeing more patients in a 4-day work week that he saw at 5. But it was easy to have a conversation, and have that conversation throughout the year saying, hey, this is affecting you, this is affecting you. And of course, it's an easy red green indicator.
Mike, are you
Yeah, go ahead.
are you going through this scorecard with your clients on a monthly basis or
Monthly.
quarterly? Monthly.
So we give them the option, depending on how often they want to see this face, monthly or quarterly, and depending on where they are in the life cycle. What we typically do on a startup is the first 3 months, we want to get them out of the gate. We do quarterly to save them some money. And then we go to a monthly type base, especially the groups, where we do the whole back office or whatnot. So,
How do you get the information? Is it,
so the biggest thing from our standpoint where we differentiate, and I don't want to get too salesy, so please cut me off if I am. The biggest thing that we've differentiated ourselves from the other CPAs, and I know there's some great ones out there in this industry, is a lot of my peers have gone wealth management. We have gone into data aggregation and real-time systems. Meaning I can tell any one of my doctors that sign up for this solution Wednesday at 1:36 in the afternoon on any of them, how much AP they have in the bank, how much cash they have, and where their AR is. We do real-time accounting, and we do it for $700 a month. So for our standpoint, it's all about aggregation data. So we train the front desk to send the end-of-day report every day. We're working on developing our own software. We're there. We're actually meeting the developer next week to suck the data out ourselves, but we're not there yet, so I won't say it. And then the AP, we have all the bills sent in. They have a private fax number, email address for every single location or every single entity. And we have an AP team there in Plano, Texas, processing bills, doing a bank reconciliation every single day. We have view-only access to the bank. So our largest client is $300 million in revenue. They get their financials on the second day of the month. So
Markland, not when you almost killed Earl, who they know, right? But the first
Earl Douglas?
Yeah.
I almost
Earl
killed him
Douglas.
in a golf cart.
He'll tell you the story later. But when you made the presentation in Orlando, in front of that
That's
entire
exactly
group,
what I was thinking.
I met with a Chinese gentleman who had a farm that really impressed Underwood and I.
Sika.
Yeah, and they're pulling out of the merchant services.
That guy's got some interesting data.
So
too.
VJ is a great guy.
That guy.
Yep, I know him.
Yeah.
So and I don't want to speak ill of anybody, unfortunately, the product wasn't given its accurate data. It's an impressive product, and there was some ideas that we got off of it, but it wasn't given its accurate. He hasn't solved the problem, which is why it's taken us a little bit longer to solve the problem of when a front desk goes and does a post-close adjustment. It only takes a snapshot. Once you go back and make a prior period adjustment, it doesn't have data. So I've talked to him, I know him, it's a very good product.
Yeah.
We started utilizing that software in the very beginning, but we pulled off of it because our doctors were saying it's not right. So,
Go back to the DMSO slide. I have
yeah, please.
Which one? This one?
that, right.
Okay.
So, what I heard you saying, whether it's 2 out of 120 or whatever, that we're going to multi-store environments or
Really?
whatever you want to call it.
That number.
And some are kind of owner-operated, one person, maybe more than one person. But then there are other people that provide different services, right? Say, I'm going to take 10 or 15% off the top. You just go full with teeth and then everything else, which is kind of what you do, right? And then I get a little confused about where does one company start and the other stop?
Right.
And how do you provide a unified environment out there?
So,
Help me with, where is it going really? Is it, somebody saying, I want 15% of your revenues in order to provide those services? Because it sounds like to me you're one of those things.
now, so I think what we want to be careful to delineate here is that usually that model is constructed by the owner-operator who's built to 2, 3, 4, and they have to build that model to continue to scale.
Right.
What we deliver when we deliver in that full capacity is the ability for a single owner-operator who's only going to do 1 or 2 practices to have the efficiencies needed to be profitable enough in those 1 to 2 practices, to be competitive enough to have the practice that they want to have. When we work with DMSOs, and we do a lot of work with DMSOs, they may be purchasing one of our service lines at a time on an a la carte basis. We don't come as take one, take everything. We just have the capacity to enter the market at various angles. So a lot of the DMSOs that we work with will probably hub off a mic for accounting bases or CFO type services, and then we're in the market for them to do site selection, market analytics, and provide the financing.
So you do accounting, tax, forecasting, all of the
Yeah,
above?
so we're CFO, CPA firm core,
Right.
and then the healthcare consulting CFO. We don't do wealth management, which a lot of our peers do. I think it's a conflict of interest, but, and we don't do billing in this environment. We strategically partnered with other MSOs
Right.
that do some of those core functions. But to get to your question, where we're seeing in a lot of struggles, which we have some good friends that do this, that charge a 6, 10, 12% fees on top line. The problem in a standard one-off, dental practice, we're only hoping to drop 35 to the bottom. So if we're taking 15,
It's tough.
Yeah.
and you have what we typically see 11% on debt financing, just all in blended cash and interest, doesn't leave a whole lot for the doctor. So what we tend to see is they come in, and then they get booted out once they fix the problems, they get booted out.
Right.
So that's why a lot of those true MSOs that are trying to offer the outside billing without ownership, they find that struggle within themselves that they get kicked out.
I can see that.
Every good consultant works themselves out of a job, right?
Yeah.
So that's what the problem is there. But we are seeing the people that are saying, hey, come do the buy contract, get my, for a royalty 2%. Because they can justify that. If they get a point savings on lab and dental supplies, they're neutral at that point. And then hopefully some of the a la carte services like accounting, tax, that kind of stuff.
So this is so are you on 1.0, 2.0, or 3.0 today?
Yeah, pretty much all.
Okay. So historically, you and I have said we'd rather lend money to a vet practice, let's just say vet, Carol, that has 4 or 5 vets as opposed to a single vet practice. Do you all credit people, whoever is credit today? What is your view of all of this?
You all credit people.
Yeah, well, we got multiple credit people here on that side. And then we got Scooter, that's another question coming.
Yes, let's just open up to Q&A. What questions do you have?
Well, that would be
I think you shift from a little bit of with your primary focus on them as a doctor to them as a business person. So where we put a lot of focus on their resume, what they've done as a dentist, right, and how they handle their clients, who are their clients, we have to put on a different hat as they continue upstream and grow about how are they as a business person. Okay, would be kind of the high level answer.
I met with these guys in Texas on a trip with Mike, and we saw several practices that were in this model on that trip,
We did.
and several successful ones. And, you know, what I took away from that trip was there's a huge difference in a guy running a successful DMSO model and that 1-2 practice guy. I mean, some of the people we met were 15 practices.
Yeah,
14
we saw, that
practices.
was, on that trip, we saw Kessner,
Yeah.
who has 12, I think, and was adding 2 more. But then we saw a couple of other borrowers that were in the startup phase, or not startup, but in the growth phase, where they had 3 offices, and their plan is to try and add 2 to 5 practices a year. So they're, you know, trying to build up
Yeah,
based
the
throughout this
execution-
model.
The execution and the systems, they seem to already have thought out in their minds, seem, you know, they were really already there. They had those things thought out.
But remember, we saw them at 12, where they were at 4, is not where they are at 12. So there is the evolutionary process, and you will see more of what you would think of as your traditional solo practitioner. You'll see more of them wanting to do 2, 3, 4 to add the efficiencies, and that's where the services, the ability to deliver the services in that area, the systems architecture for them to be able to do that, does not take away from whether or not they are still a proficient dentist and are they a proficient business owner. We're trying to, I think, come from a standpoint of view that we understand they're not proficient business owner on the front side, and that's where we're adding the support to help them get to that position.
And getting back to the first point I made of saying we hit a lending wall at 3 and 8 locations, at 8 to 10 locations, they hit an operational infrastructure wall. If they don't invest, which gets scary for them because now they're dropping $200,000-300,000 on internal salaries for internal operations manager to help them run those practices. Well, now they have to have 3 or 4 more practices to get back to baseline 10. So it's interesting when you get to that point, you have to make a strategic plan to, I want to push through that. You know, and so we see it. We have several clients that have stopped at 8 to 10, and they want to get bigger, but they don't quite know how.
Explain why they want to get bigger too, because there is a point upon exit strategy that's built into this market. There's a huge demand.
One
coming out.
slide that we flipped over. So when you hit 8 to 10 locations, we all get into a multiple. We do valuations at our firm, and what we typically say is a standard 62 to 82% trailing 12 on collections on evaluation. So let's just say 70 cents on the dollar, or 2 times EBITDA is 35% net times 2, 70 cents. So with that, when we start getting to 15 locations, getting again past that 12 number, when we start getting to 8 to 10, they're starting to be attractive to consultants, people that want to help them get to 15. And possibly buy early, so buy at a 4 to 5 EBITDA, which is a multiple of you know, what they have been doing or what they've been offered. The other side of that is when they get to 15, 20, 25 locations, now we're talking about on the Wall Street model, which is I know a slide we put past, Wall Street's level dentistry, we're talking a 12 to 15 EBITDA on exit. So we have clients right now that are getting offered
15 times EBITDA?
Yes, sir.
You're kidding.
No.
So now you see the demand that's.
We have 2
going
clients
forward.
right now with offers of $150 million on the table that they're saying no to because they want to keep going. So they're rolling the dice. 150 is not enough. We can all understand that, right? So yes, so that's what they're doing. But that's the stable revenue streams, the greenfield opportunities, and what these private equity groups are hoping to do is buy at 12 times EBITDA, flip it at 15. What they're trying to do when they're at 8 to 10 locations is buy at 4 or 5 EBITDA, aggregate them immediately, and flip to 12.
And when they do buy, they want perpetual growth as well. So
Yes.
And touch on, to get to that 12% EBITDA,
12 times?
12 times.
12 times, sorry. How many practices do they need to have? Touch on, once they go from 8 to 10, or 8 to 15.
So just as I mentioned, so when you're at 8 to 10, they're at 4 EBITDA, right? They're looking at, the guys who are trying to buy them, like a couple of our groups right now are trying to buy a bunch of 6 to 10 location groups, because they can buy them at 4 times EBITDA and they're immediately worth 8, 10, 12 times EBITDA when they come into their mix. So it's immediate arbitrage, which valuation arbitrage. When you get to 10 to 15 locations, you're looking at 6 to 8 EBITDA. And that probably starts about 15 locations, sometimes up to 20. And then there's this gap where it's kind of 8, I think, EBITDA, up to about 25, at 25 it flips. 12 EBITDA is what we've been seeing. Now, not everybody's getting 12, obviously, it's how well is that system? Can they immediately turn over? Because these are a bunch of Wall Street guys. They're not doctors, they have to have a friendly doctor in place. Because in a lot
Are
of
there
the
any
states.
public companies out here? National, roll-up public companies?
Yeah, well, owned by a lot of big PE groups, for the most part.
But they're
Publicly
private, they're owned
traded.
by PE.
Yeah, they're all private that I know of. I think there's one public company that owns as part of the
I haven't
subsidiary.
seen much of the.
I just can't think of it, I just can't think of the name. I know there is one that owns, but it's mainly a bunch of private equity that are rolling up $300-400 million.
Do you know who owns Heartland? Is that a private equity firm that owns Heartland?
Yeah, I think it is private equity that owns Heartland. So, I'll think of it later, I'm sure.
How much debt is too much debt on a smaller, a 2 to 5
That's a great
practice?
question.
When it doesn't cash flow?
I mean, what is it times revenue? I mean, is it
So
five,
let's walk through the age of maturity, right? So if we want to do 450,000 that first year of revenue, we're going to want to get to, depending on, again, if they're not, let's talk non-groups. So if we do 450 the first year, we're going to want to get to 650 the second year, pushing on 900 year 3. So when you start looking at that, and you get to 11% cost of funds, if you will, 10-11% cost of funds, that's where you're at. So how much is too much debt? It really just gets into what your taste is. Get back to that question of what is y'all's appetite? What are y'all looking for in deals? And do y'all want a second generation location, or a second location, a third location? Are there certain rules in SBA world that limits you on that type of world?
It really is about tolerance, but I do think you see a number, I think 3 to 4 times revs on an existing practice, maybe that's not growing that well.
Yeah.
It's definitely a red light.
Well, and in some cases, you're rolling the dice a little bit, because I know we always want one location to cash flow the debt for all 3 or all 2 or all 4, whatever it may be. I get that, and, so what we typically, we just run the model up. I mean, and from a tolerance standpoint, I was telling Mike, last year, we did bank packages and generated 100 million loans out of our firm. So from our standpoint, we see a lot of deals, we put a lot of packages together for the lenders we work with. So it just gets into your tolerance, which is why I asked the question, what can I do for you guys? We have 9 million this month coming to you guys between Choate and I on just 2 deals. So, I mean, we want to work with you guys some more. We just want to know what your appetite is.
It should be stated, though, that we don't believe that there's some type of linearity that more is always better, that you can,
Right.
there's obviously groups that underperform,
Yeah.
and at that particular point, there's, I don't believe that we're engaged in pushing forward groups that are on shaky footing that way. I mean, he's running the model out, but we're not looking at it and saying, we need equity partners. This is a lender, traditional lending relationship, and so, based upon what you're seeing, it's really model specific, but you draw your own tolerance levels, I think.
So the other thing I want to flip to, and I meant to touch on earlier, when you're taking a solo practice, we drop 35 cents to the bottom line. For every dollar, we drop 35 cents.
Pre or post officer comp?
That is officer comp.
That is.
Pre-debt.
Yeah.
Pre-debt, 11% off that, so 24 cents. On a management company, we drop 22 to 25 cents pre-debt to the bottom line. So that is the difference. However, note that it's only a 10-cent difference. However, we're paying the doctor 15 to 18 cents. I mean, we picked up a few points because of our ability to generate revenue and our savings in cost. So that's in the appendix. You'll see it if you want to see true models. We put in some, I think, 3-year models on single and group practices.
This presentation, they put together a very nice supporting appendix. It's 70 pages or so. I'm going to send that out to everybody. So everybody will get a copy of that. There's a lot of supporting information.
It's just a definition of a lot of the deliverables, but inside that specific, and we'll highlight that.
It should be
interested in the forms.
Okay.
I have it. I'll email it out to everyone.
So David, I think, so what I hear you guys saying, they're different tranches. As you go up the food chain, you're to whatever you just said, you're worth 4 to 6 EBITDA, then 8 to 10, then 12. It would be interesting to be the senior debt holder on the way up the chain to some point, because we know that 12 someday going to be back to 9, or But if you're a senior at that point, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I'd say we're not in the business of financing arbitrage on multiples.
No.
We're a cash flow lender. And But we've been doing multiple site practices without the, you know, the existing ones having to support fully the new ones with no assumption for any revenue, is not where our underwriting's at. We're doing, especially if you have somebody that's done 3 or 4, and you can show the same store progression, and they're in a similar market, taking advantage. We're layering in the year 1 with the existing base, so you're just templating year 1, 2, and 3 of all the stores where they are. Again,
Do
that's
they
all.
have to be cross collateralized? I mean, typically?
You know, collateral on a leasehold dental, who cares?
Right.
Typically, we do want a UCC position on them and corporate guarantees, but, you know, what's our least senior position we've been in on some of them? 7?
Yeah, I mean,
9?
it just depends on how many locations we've done.
So,
yeah.
we're betting on the manager and the cash flow. And again, when you're templating those years for the sites together, there needs to be a little bit more cushion than like a 1.25 coverage. So we're probably more in the on projections, we want more like 150, because they will stumble, you know, it isn't simple to grow any business, multi-site business. But the ones that I've been most intrigued with, that Mike's brought forth, are the ones that have done 3 or 4, so you have a track record and you're getting them to 8, and you're getting them to...
We want to bring to you guys opportunities with a model that's proven, a concept that's proven before. I mean, we don't want to situate in front of your credit team an estimate that we believe this is going to work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, typically speaking, I think when we're bringing in opportunities, they should have proven the model with either 1 or 2 locations, multiple years doing it.
And we look at a global stat, we look at, I mean, it's at night, and we can show you some template, I think they're in there, some template packages that come along, and we do it together with them. But you say 150, is that what you said, 1.5 debt coverage?
1.5, 150.
Let me ask a clarifying point, because
Yeah.
this got us in one of our friends. 150 with or without management fee? Because that's where it gets very tricky. We had, we won't name banks, we had banks that went without management fee add back, which is the proper way, frankly, the only way to look at it is the only way you're going to get there. They got 6 months into the relationship, decided to flip it. Nope, we need to not add back management fee. You can't meet debt coverage at that point.
Well, in clarifying question on
Yeah, please,
management
please.
fees. Management fees paid to whom, paying for what?
Services, the corporate.
The
So,
corporate is owned by
the corporate management.
our
Yeah.
borrower.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're looking
DMSO
at
stuff.
EBITDA at the operating level, not the corporate level.
Well, and that's where it gets back to the cross collateralization. So when we start going to management structures, when we go to 2 or 3 locations, we immediately throw a management company in place.
Right.
Because we want to centralize buying, centralize operations.
But that
So-
management company is going to be part of our transaction, part of the borrower. So
But it's also
the
been,
company
it's also
A
been
is paying
collateralized in
themselves
location 1 and 2.
the management fee. So we would add that back to cash
It
flow.
depends on the level of corporate overhead,
Okay.
as the number of stores they have. If they build a corporate overhead for 10 stores,
Yeah.
and it only opened 3, then the management fee, which is paying for all this corporate overhead, to add that all back and ignore the cash flow drain, we would not look at it like that. We would want, again, to look at corporate EBITDA or NOI to cover debt service at a 1.25 to 1.50. Yeah, so I think I went the conservative way on you.
And that's okay. And again, it's all education for us as well. Because as we build packages, we typically build them to a 1.25, 1.3 look to make sure that the management fee as non-add back is covered, but at the same time, back to the cross collateralization point, location 1 and 2, management company is always collateralized. So when we're going 3, 4, 5 location, we've already had but if you guys do a 7th, 8th, 9th position, I guess it doesn't matter, but you know, it's already collateralized. That's what we want to make sure.
Yeah,
So,
we're cash flow, well, we're management first, cash flow second,
perfect.
SBA guarantee, perfection third, collateral, we don't care about.
Perfect. All right. Other
Would
questions?
you rather lend to solo practice? Would you'd rather lend to, and this is, could be an acquisition or a startup, 6 months out of school or 10 years out of school working as an associate?
Oh, great question.
It is a good question.
You know, Brian immediately looks at me.
Well,
with all
I
that
have my own
experience.
opinion, but
You know, I think it depends on what the business plan is of that associate, 6 months out of school versus 10 years. 10 years out of school, they're still just an employee, right? We need them to think business. So if we have a business acumen 6 months out of school, and speak to me, I started my firm 1 year out of school. Thankfully, CIT, we talked about lunch, Brian Hunt gave me an opportunity. But it depends if you have the business acumen to run that business, that practice 6 months out of school. We have a practice right now, we're dropping in West Texas, that we're doing the entire management of it, and February 15th, we hand him the keys. But he has the modeling, the plan, he came to us with a plan, and he's right out of school, we'll get him started. So.
in a 10-year employee, the only thing that you're picking up there in terms of measurables are hand speed, quality, right?
Yeah.
Things of that nature. But the only thing they also know about the business model is everything they don't like, which is what's driving them to open their own practice. Because obviously they didn't have the motivation to start their own practice for 10 years. So at this point, they just got fed up to a point of working as an associate.
So if you have a 10-year employee and you're looking at his tax return and his earnings are not impressive at all for an associate dentist, is that a red flag to you?
Depends on where they're associated. It's a red flag.
If he's just a salaried associate, not necessarily, she if she is a producing associate, meaning getting paid 20-30% on production, it could be.
It depends on the cases they see, though.
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
so that's why it's specific to where they're associating, because some associateships, you would have to question why they would stay in a model like this, but some associateships, they break apart based upon the fact that they become glorified hygienists, where the owner doc still wants to keep certain procedures, and so that may not be indicative of their skill level, but it may be indicative of their inability to recognize a bad situation.
Given the, and I'll let up here, but given the propensity for older folks to need a lot more dental care, we were looking at a market just this morning of somebody looking to acquire a practice. And on one hand, I liked it because it was in a market with the demographics were slanted toward older folks, but on the lower side, it had much lower household income than normal. Probably a lot of older folks on fixed income. Is that how do you, do you want old folks with income?
I always love answering any